All right, everybody, welcome into the P2W Fantasy Network here on YouTube. My name is Colin McTamanay at Colin_MCT on Twitter. Obviously, one of the P2W Fantasy contributors here. Continuing with my series of interviewing experts, analysts, and really anyone that covers each team around the NFL here, trying to get to every team, all 32. And we're continuing on here today on, I believe it's Thursday, June 8th. Losing track of my days here, but Thursday, June 8th, we're covering the Packers today, and we have Paul Bretl. Am I saying that right?
Yep, nailed it.
Paul Bretl. All right, perfect. Paul, really just take it away here. Let people know who you are. Obviously, you got the Packers colors behind you there.
Yeah.
You've been covering the team for how long? Fan of the team. Give us a little bit more info about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm born and raised here in Green Bay. Colin and I were talking before we started that Lambeau Field is literally in the middle of neighborhoods. So some of like my first early memories are going to my grandparents' house, whose house is still about 2 blocks away from Lambeau Field because the parking lot around Lambeau can only hold so many. So if you live within, I don't know, maybe a 6, 7, 8 block radius of Lambeau, you park cars on Sundays, get a little extra cash in your pocket. So growing up, I'd head over there on Sunday mornings and just hang out with as they're bringing in the tailgaters and then watch the game at their house, and you could hear the roar of the crowd after touchdowns. And so I think just early on, those experiences, like aside from the actual football aspect, just hooked me. Really cherish those memories. And then been covering the Packers, writing about the Packers for about 4 years now. Currently, I write for Dairyland Express, which is part of Fansided, and then also contribute over at Packers Wire as well. And then I hop on ESPN Lacrosse Radio multiple times a week in season, and then throughout the off season as well. Just again, providing my insights, what I've written about, and then what I'm seeing. Specifically, we just got done with OTA practices that were open to the media. So in short, that's my story. But yeah, like I said, I'm from Green Bay, so I grew up a Packers fan. Still want to see them perform well and still want to see them win, but bringing the analysis side to it as well.
Yeah, no pressure here, but I feel like the Packers are going to be one of the more important teams for me to cover on the series here on the P2W network because really a complete overhaul on the team, other than really the coach. Obviously, LaFleur's still there, but 2 seasons ago, obviously off seasons ago, they got rid of Devontae Adams. And then this past offseason, obviously the big trade, Aaron Rodgers to the New York Jets. Obviously, that trade seemed like it was imminent for I don't know, about months. When did that start to develop that he was going to go to the Jets, or were there other teams maybe in the mix, or did it seem like it was Jets or bust?
At least from my perspective, it felt like it was just Jets or bust. I mean, if you think about from the market in terms of who's looking to acquire Aaron Rodgers, I mean, it's a small group of teams because you have to be in a position where you think I'm a quarterback away from winning the Super Bowl. Because otherwise, at this stage of where he's at in his career, nearing 40 years old, that's not a trade you're going to make unless you feel that you're in that position. So in terms of teams who fit that mold, that's obviously a very small amount because most teams who feel they're Super Bowl contenders, they have that quarterback already in place. So it really felt like the Jets were the most obvious choice and really the only one that, at least from what we've heard reported, seemed to make any sort of strong push. I know the Niners were thrown out there, but I also have to wonder what was Green Bay's willingness to send them within the conference. So I think that's where Aaron Rodgers said he wanted to go. The Jets obviously had the need. They have a very, very strong roster around them. Packers were able to send them to the AFC. So I think in terms of, who was interested, it was mostly the Jets throughout the entire process.
So let's take a look at what the Jets obviously gave up here to the Packers to get him. They gave up a 2023 second, a 2023 sixth, and a 2024 second that can become a first if Rodgers plays 65% of the snaps. Obviously, 17-game season, that's about 11 games. I would expect Rodgers to play that many. Obviously, if it doesn't, it's doomsday for the Jets. They'd have to probably turn to Zach Wilson at that point, which, however you feel about that. But then they also swapped their first-round picks this year. They jumped up from 15 to 13. From your perspective, I guess, there as an analyst, I mean, did Lucas Van Ness's name, was that swirling around? Is this a guy they felt they needed to move up 2 picks to get him? Or were there maybe some other guys that went before them at 13 that they had in mind?
So after that pick, Brian Gutekunst came down and spoke to us, and he mentioned that they had a lot of guys on the board at that point that they really liked. And I know, especially from the outside looking in, addressing the receiver position early on was a big need. Jackson Smith and Jigba was still on the board, but Lucas Van Ness, and I wrote about this, it was such a Packers pick. So before each draft, the last few years, I go through and create my short list of first round options for them, because the Packers under Gutekunst do have some pretty strict thresholds that they stick to. And Lucas Van Ness checked every one of those boxes. He was young, still just 21 years old, tested incredibly well athletically. He plays a premier position at edge rusher, which not just under Gutekunst, but under Ted Thompson is a position, one of the position groups that the Packers have prioritized early on. He's versatile, able to play inside and out. And there was a need there for Green Bay at that position. I know they have Rashawn Gary, who's coming back from an ACL injury. They have Preston Smith, but without Gary last season for a majority of the second half of the season, Packers struggled to generate regular pressure on the quarterback. And, defensively, that's the name of the game. That's what you got to do in today's NFL. So for all those reasons mentioned, to me, that was not a surprise pick. So like I said, I put together my short list, and Van Ness was one of the 4 players that I had on that short list, because again, everything I just went through, he checked all those boxes. So at least for me, I didn't see it as a surprise whatsoever that they ended up picking him, just because of all those reasons mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, if you're giving up a guy like Aaron Rodgers, and a little detail of the trade is to just have that 2-pick advantage in the first round, why not add it in there? And a guy like Lucas Van Ness, I mean, in the division NFC North, the Packers have kind of been running the table for years now with Aaron Rodgers. And I think some people would probably pick the Lions or maybe even the Bears or Vikings to, win the division this year. So it's going to be really interesting. Having him on the defensive side of the ball will be key. As far as fantasy football goes, obviously we're the P2W Fantasy Network here on YouTube. Let's take a look at this team and what to expect from the 2023 offense. And we kind of have to take everything from the years past and wipe it away clean, because we have a complete new signal caller on the offense. Obviously, Jordan Love, drafted first-round pick in 2020, hasn't had a ton of game action. He's filled in here or there, or come in here and there for Aaron Rodgers. What do you expect from Jordan Love in 2023? Because obviously the team had the option, the 5th-year option as a first rounder, $20 million guaranteed. Instead, they signed him to an extension with 15 guaranteed, but he can earn up to 24 million. So maybe some people might look at that and go, hey, they're not completely confident this guy's the starter. Or maybe it's just kind of a team-friendly, player-friendly deal for the next 2 years for both sides here. Do you feel that that Jordan Love is ready to take over this offense? And what do you expect from him in his first season as the confident starter week 1?
Yeah, so about the extension, from my perspective, I feel like that was a win-win for both sides, because that 5th-year option for Green Bay, that's essentially a 1-year deal. So Love's cap hit next year, 2024, would have been $20 million on the books. Right. No way to navigate around that. And this is still a Packers team that really pushed the salary cap limits the last few off seasons, and they're starting to feel the side effects of that this year. With a number of dead cap hits, including the massive Aaron Rodgers one, but there's other ones on there as well. And they're still going to be feeling that to a degree next year. So from a cap perspective, that gives them more flexibility. If you're Jordan Love, I mean, you just got a major payday, because he was still playing on his rookie deal for this season. So, to a degree, I feel like it was a win-win for both sides. As far as what to expect from him this season, I mean, throw the win-loss record, throw the record out the window this year. Aaron Rodgers' first season as a starter, the Packers went 6-10. So, I mean, obviously they're out there to win games. That's their goal. That's what they're trying to accomplish. But wins and losses are not going to define for the Green Bay Packers this year in terms of Jordan Love and where he's at in his development, in my eyes, whether it's successful or not. What they're going to want to see from him is just progression throughout the season. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be mistakes made, both by him and, in trying to navigate an offense with so many young pass catchers in it as well. But those mistakes need to be corrected. We need to see him and the offense moving along, his ability to play within the system, his ability to make plays on the move as well. It's just, checking those boxes along the way to show that, he can be the go-to guy for the next decade here. And on top of that, it's how does he, control the offense at the line of scrimmage. It's some of those intangible things as well that aren't going to necessarily show up in the film room. And one of my observations of him so far this offseason is he's just even keeled. And Brian Gutekunst talked about earlier this offseason, he brought up the Chiefs game from a few years ago where they just blitzed the heck out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And although from a statistical standpoint, that wasn't a very good performance, how Love handled that, especially on a short week's rest. Matt LaFleur, I don't necessarily think in that game did him a ton of favors in terms of the play calling, but just how he handled that was something that really impressed Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur, and the Green Bay Packers. So just continuing to see that and then that progression throughout the season.
Yeah, I think how I'm approaching Jordan Love for 2023, especially from a fantasy perspective, is really just cautiously optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
The optimism comes from the fact that he's been in the building for the past couple of years. The cautious side, obviously, is the limited gameplay. So for fantasy purposes, probably a streaming option. I don't think anyone's drafting him to start week one on their fantasy rosters. But, hey, maybe if there's a matchup here and there throughout the season, you can feel confident about Jordan Love plugging in there.
One other thing I'll add just about the offense in general is and I know we'll get to the skill position players here, but the diversity of skill sets and talent that the Packers have this year throughout the offense is much greater than last season.
Yeah.
Now, again, that doesn't mean that collectively this group is going to be better, but I just mean the versatility that they have more of it this season amongst the receiver, the tight end groups. And what that allows, Matt LaFleur to do is really dive into the playbook by moving guys around and what he calls the illusion of complexity. Because if Luke Musgrave's in the slot running a deep crosser, and then a quarter later you have Jaden Reed in the slot running that same deep crosser, obviously how the defense defends each of those players and then subsequently the rest of the Packers offense is going to be different. And so that versatility that they have will hopefully allow Matt LaFleur to, because he can move guys around, have simpler concepts, which is obviously a good thing for such a young offense, but make it complex for the defense because they're going to be running the same play from a variety of personnel. They're going to be running like plays that begins similarly but end differently. And all of that is hopefully keeps the defense off balance and guessing. So because of that versatility, the ability to move guys around and play numerous different roles, it hopefully helps keep the offensive game plan simple, which again is what you need for such a young group.
Yeah, I would have to completely agree with that. And the versatility standpoint, it's a little frustrating that they didn't have this group of weapons even last year with Aaron Rodgers. Really wasn't a versatile offense for the last couple of years. It was really just Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams just connecting, which, hey, is not a bad thing. But I'm excited to see this group work. And let's dive into some of them here. We'll start with Aaron Jones, who's back with the team, as some people thought, maybe myself included, thought maybe he could be one of the surprise, maybe not so surprising cuts this offseason, but he took a little bit of a pay cut, if I'm not mistaken, to stay with the team, lowered his base salary, even on record saying, hey, I'm not greedy, but I think it's really significant that he's back. From a fantasy standpoint, the last 4 years, 2019 to 2022, he's finished as the RB3, RB5, RB14, RB11. His touches have gone from 285, 248, 223, but last year back up to 272. And a big reason for that is he's a great pass catching back. He's averaging 52 catches over the past 4 seasons. He had a career high last year in 59. And he's only gone up as far as his rank amongst the running backs in the pass catching statistics, 14th, 12th, 7th, and then 6th amongst all running backs last year in receptions. And he was second in Packers targets last year behind Allen Lazard, only 1 reception behind Allen Lazard. That in mind, can we expect Aaron Jones to be in the mix to lead this team in targets again? Or do you think that shifts more towards the receivers, given the versatility you were just talking about?
I think he could be, top 3 or 4 on the team. I think he's going to be there just because that's such an important role that he plays. And for this Packers offense to, in my opinion, be functioning at their best, it's going to be spreading the ball around. It's going to be, different guys being the quote unquote, maybe go-to option from week to week. So I expect him to be a big part of the passing attack this season. He's shown that he can do it from the slot. He's even done it from the boundary as well, including out of the backfield. So that's going to be an important part. And just in general, I understand why a lot of the fixation is going to be on, the receivers, the tight ends, the young pass catchers that the Packers have, but any potential success that they're going to have this season begins with the run game. You have young receivers, a first-time starting quarterback. Like, if the run game isn't efficient and effective and they're continuously in second and long, third and long situations, obviously that's a recipe for disaster. Puts them in predictable situations. Defense can pin their ears back as pass rushers. And looking back at last season, the injuries that the Packers had along the offensive line through the first 9 weeks and all the movement that they had, it wasn't talked about a ton, but that was a huge reason behind the issues that they had. Defenses did not fear the passing game. They crowded the line of scrimmage and made running the ball more difficult. Green Bay was relying heavily on the quick passing game. Obviously, that becomes more challenging when you have so many defenders near the line of scrimmage. So even with a future Hall of Fame, 4-time MVP quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, like, there was a noticeable effect that, injured offensive line and just not as effective run game had on that offense as a whole. So you can only imagine how that would be magnified if Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon aren't able to get going on the ground this year.
Yeah, I felt like every week I was waiting to see if Bakhtiari was going to play. That was a really frustrating part of their season, just not having him on the field. He makes such an impact. But yeah, let's shift to AJ Dillon for a second too. He has yet to hit the 200 carry mark since joining the Green Bay Packers 3 seasons ago. No more than 34 receptions in a season. So am I correct in saying that Aaron Jones will probably handle the pass catching duties while maybe AJ Dillon breaks out in a big way and gets a little bit more carries this season?
Yeah, I think Jones will definitely have more receptions than Dillon, but Dillon's still going to be an active part of it. Like you had mentioned, he had 30 plus receptions. I would expect him to be in that range again, because of the versatility that he brings. But he's someone that the Packers need to bounce back this season. His first 2 seasons, he averaged 4.5 yards per carry. Last year is down to 4.1 on a similar amount of rush attempts from 2022 to 2021. He forced fewer missed tackles. The PFF stat, yards after contact, he went from ranking 7th in 2021 to, I think he was tied for 20th last season. And then he was less efficient and effective as a pass catcher. Didn't catch as many passes on a similar number of attempts. Didn't have nearly as many yards per catch either. And again, we always want to find what's the one reason in football. There's always a million things that contribute to that. Again, the injuries to the offensive line was a contributor to that, just because Dillon's not the same creator that Aaron Jones is with the ball in his hands. So, but he's someone that they need to have bounce back this season, because he's going to be a big part of the run game. He's going to be a big part of the passing game. He's still going to be running back to Aaron Jones. What I hope to see, and in part, Aaron Jones was dealing with some nagging injuries late last season, so he was not practicing fully. The Packers, for a few game stretch towards the end, they were managing his workload a little bit. But if Aaron Jones can be fully healthy for this entire season, my hope is that we see that carry split favor Jones a little bit more, because I think last year was in the neighborhood of 55% Jones, 45% for AJ Dillon, because Aaron Jones, he's what makes this offense go. His ability as a ball carrier, as a pass catcher. So I hope to see more carries for him this season if he can stay healthy from start to finish.
Yeah, I think what stands out to me last year with that in mind, Jones obviously dealing with some nagging injuries, is that in the red zone, Jones did out carry Dillon by 29 carries to 27 from within 20 yards, but from within 10 and 5 yards, Dillon absolutely blew Jones away. 17 carries to 9 within the 10, and then 10 carries for Dillon to Jones is just 2 within the 5-yard line. Is that something, even if Jones is able to carry the load, that you expect to continue, or do you think we should see more Aaron Jones in the red zone this year?
I think you should see more Aaron Jones in the red zone. Obviously, there's situations, you're on the goal line, you got the big power back in
Quadzilla,
AJ Dillon. Exactly. Put him in there, but look at Aaron Jones' touchdown numbers, from 2019 to 20. He knows how to get in the end zone. And one thing that collectively I hope we see from Matt LaFleur in this offense is that they stick with the run game more in the red zone. last year. Again, that's defenses were taking that away from the Packers. They were daring them to throw the ball, and the Packers oftentimes obliged. The problem was that passing game with the young receivers, it wasn't good enough to shoulder that burden of being in those predictable situations and saying, all right, go beat the guy across from you. Or at least it wasn't through the first half of the season. So the Packers, I think, have to be better about not letting the defense completely dictate what they're going to do. Now, on paper, is running into loaded boxes over and over and over again. Is that the prudent move? No. But you can't just rely on the passing game solely either, especially as you get closer to the red zone. It's condensed space. It's already more difficult to move the ball through the air, especially when the defense now knows it's coming. So I think just in general, I want to see them lean a little bit more on the run game when they're in the red zone.
Yeah, I mean, I would appreciate that. I think I'm going to be targeting Packers running backs more than the receivers this year, where I think some people, that might be an unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people are excited about these receivers. So let's talk about them for a second. I think the big name, obviously, everyone's wondering about for fantasy football is Christian Watson. Second round pick last year. Slow start, couple injuries here and there. Some people were calling him glass, which, concussions are just concussions. It's a contact sport here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But absolute debauchery from weeks 10 through 13. He was the wide receiver 3 on a points per game basis. He scored all 7 of his rookie touchdowns in that window. 51.2% of his season's receiving yards in that 4-week window, 6.7 targets per game, weeks 10 through 13, just 3.9 targets per game in every other game. Do we expect Christian Watson to be the lead receiver, lead target in this passing game this year, or do you have someone else in mind?
Betting right now, I would say yes, just
Okay.
because of his talent,
Yeah.
his ability, that speed of his, the big play threats. And Matt LaFleur said earlier this offseason that what they want from him this year is to be able to expand his route tree and what he's asked to do. So obviously he was a downfield target, a big play threat last season, but they're hoping to expand, the areas in the field that he's working in and what he's asked to do this year. Not that he's not going to be a downfield threat again this year, but there's going to be more asked of him, given that he is wide receiver one right now. But Romeo Doubs and Jordan Love throughout OTAs, like there seems to be some real obvious chemistry that the two have developed over the offseason. Had the chance to talk to Romeo after last Wednesday's practice, and he said that he worked out with Love several times this offseason, and it really felt like on the practice field, in those 2-minute drills that the Packers are running during OTAs, he's been a go-to target for Love over the middle. And Romeo Doubs, Matt LaFleur said about him, he doesn't think that there's a route that he can't run. So he brings that overall ability to the receiver position where he's not going to generate big plays as often as like Christian Watson, but he's someone you can put inside, you can put outside, and you can ask him to run a wide variety of routes. And of course, there's refinement that's needed. He's only in his second season. I want to make sure I add that caveat, but he has the potential to be able to win in a variety of ways. And like Jordan Love said in practice right now, it's not that Jordan Love is under center, in practice thinking, all right, where's Romeo? It's just, he said, he's just getting open. He's a really good route runner and he's just getting open. So I'm giving him the ball, and it's that simple. So just on playmaking and potential and Christian Watson's role expanding and the talent that he has, like right now, I'm going to pick him because it's the safe bet to be wide receiver one. But just based on what we've seen this summer or early this summer, and even the plays Romeo made last summer and into the season, I think that he's going to be a big target for Love as well.
Yeah, I felt like at the end of training camp last year, everyone started really, really rallying around Romeo Doubs as this breakout candidate. Unfortunately, he got injured, and Christian Watson kind of took over that. But as far as chemistry goes, I really appreciate you coming on here today, Paul, because that is good insight. Because I feel like from a chemistry perspective, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I got my Philly shirt on here, and there was a touchdown that Christian Watson scored, I believe, in Week 13 against the Eagles.
Yep.
Kind of meaningless in that game that everyone is hanging their hats on. I've seen it all over Twitter. People are reposting it. Look at Love's connection with Watson. It's one play. So I really think this is something we need to keep an eye on over the summer. And just having that little tidbit from OTAs and the workouts with Love and Doubs, really interesting perspective, because he's going to be drafted far after Christian Watson, I
Mhm.
can bet you, in fantasy drafts this year. As someone who plays in a dynasty format, I did draft a couple shares of Jaden Reed this offseason. Tell me about Jaden Reed. Should I be excited about that pick, getting him in the second round of my rookie drafts?
Yeah, so through OTAs, he's been the clear wide receiver 3. They're going through their basic installs right now, so it's been Watson and Dobbs on the boundary and Jaden Reed in the slot. But going back to what I mentioned earlier, the versatility, he can play inside and out. John Eric Sullivan, he's the Packers director of player personnel after the draft. They said what they really liked about him was his speed to win on the boundary. At one of his workouts, the Packers, this wasn't his official time, but the Packers clocked him running a 4.37. And even during individual drills, as he's running routes, you can see that burst. And they also talked about just the strength that he has and that ability to be able to win inside from the slot. And he's been really, really good at making contested catches. So he's been wide receiver 3 throughout OTAs here. And then I'll throw out Samori Toure as well. He's been getting, he's behind Reed, at least from what we've seen, but he's been getting some opportunities with the ones as well. Jason Vrabel is the Packers wide receiver coach. And this was about 2 weeks or so ago when we were meeting with him. He said that, of all the players on this Packers team this offseason, it's been Toure and how he's developed his body and how he's looking that really has a lot of people turning heads. He's added 8 pounds over the offseason of muscle. Toure said it was, to help with durability to get through a long season. But we all know run blocking is a really important aspect of playing receiver in the Matt LaFleur offense. And he's someone that I could see carving out, kind of a downfield role. As I mentioned, Christian Watson's still going to be asked to do that, of course, but if he takes on larger responsibilities, you still want to have that vertical presence in your offense to spread the defense out, get better spacing, create opportunities for others underneath. So that's a potential role that I could see him fitting into as well.
Very interesting. Obviously, the other aspect of this pass game are the tight ends, and we don't
Mhm.
typically see rookie tight ends perform well in their first season for fantasy football, but we've got 2 to talk about here on the Green Bay Packers, and we'll cover them really quickly here as we wrap up here with Paul Bretl covering the Packers. We have Luke Musgrave, second round pick out of Oregon State. That pick was from the Aaron Rodgers trade from the Jets. And then 36 picks later in the third round, they drafted Tucker Kraft, third round pick, South Dakota State. Talk about these guys for a second. What do you expect from them in their rookie seasons? Was one going to be more of a receiving threat, one going to be more of a blocking threat? I think people are trying to sift through that and figure out what to expect from these 2 guys.
Yeah, so I know they're only in shorts right now. Pads aren't on. But Luke Musgrave running down the seam, man,
Yeah,
smooth, quick.
I've seen some videos.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to training camp and see him in the pads and see what he can do. But like you hit the nail on the head, and this is something I've written about often: is rookie tight ends have a really, really difficult transition. I believe it was Matt LaFleur said this offseason that, outside of the quarterback position, it's the toughest transition from college to the NFL just because of all the responsibilities, knowing routes, concepts like receiver, blocking assignments, and technique like an offensive tackle. And then in the LaFleur offense, playing inline, playing in the slot, sometimes playing on the boundary as well. Like they are asked to do a lot. The difference, I think, this year to where they potentially could find some success is that the Packers need them to. Like it's Josiah DeGuara, who's an H back. Like he's
Mhm.
more of an H back than an actual tight end. He's going to be playing out of the backfield quite a bit. And then it's Tyler Davis, who was a primary special teams player last year. Like they need those 2 to produce. And there's going to be ups and downs. They're going to have to weather the storm. But for this offense to, reach its potential, whatever that is, I don't think anybody even knows what that might be at this time. They're going to need those 2. Musgrave, from what I've seen so far, I think is going to be more of the pass catching threat, whereas Kraft is going to be more of the inline blocker.
Mhm.
Now, something that Gutekunst talked about after the draft is both of these guys have the ability to block and pass catch. They both have over 500 career run blocking snaps from their respective college careers. So both are going to be asked to do that. This isn't going to be a one or the other where Kraft's the blocker, Musgrave is the receiver. It's going to be both. But if I had to put one in a bucket right now, that's where I see them, at least early on in their careers, leaning towards. And these guys, I feel like we'll see the real effects down the road. Again, it's a difficult transition, but the Packers tight end room from last year was really reliable, but Robert Tonyan was a limited pass catcher. He averaged 8.9 yards per catch, and there was also predictability with how these guys were utilized. Robert Tonyan was the primary pass catcher. If he was on the field, and you're a defender, you kind of knew what he was going to do. Mercedes Lewis, terrific blocker, but you knew he was going to be blocking. Same thing with Josiah DeGuara. Whereas with these two, playing inside and out, playing from the slot, blocking, being pass catchers, it's going to add some more. And again, going back to the versatility, some unpredictability to this offense that not only can benefit themselves and add some playmaking to the tight end position and over the middle, but that has a trickle down effect and benefits everyone else within the offense. So I think the potential's there for these guys to have an impact. But again, keep going back to your point. It's a tough transition for them.
Yeah, I think from a fantasy football perspective, it sounds like they're more dynasty picks more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone's going to be relying on these guys, as the Packers probably won't be either in 2023. But obviously, as you said, the potential is there. Luke Musgrave looks fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I was really high on him ahead of the draft. Always wanted the Packers to add a tight end this offseason, whether it be in free agency or in the draft. And they added two in the draft. So something to get excited about. Paul, great interview. Really, really appreciate you coming on here today. You can tell that you're a lifelong Packers fan, passionate about this team. Great insight. We appreciate it here at P2W Fantasy. Anything else, anything you maybe left out, or any bold predictions you may have for this Packers team before we let you go?
No, I think we hit on all the players who are going to be key contributors to this offense this season. I'll throw this out there. I don't see him making a big impact this year, but I like Dontavian Wicks, 5th round pick out of Virginia. His
wide receiver,
long-term, a receiver, his long-term trajectory. He's someone needs refinement, again, 5th round pick, but he's someone who is a smooth route runner and can run a variety of routes. You can ask him to do a number of things. So I like his long-term, potential trajectory. But for all the guys that we just mentioned, they're all ahead of him. And the running backs and tight ends are going to be active in the passing game. So at least from a fantasy perspective, in 2023, that's not someone I'm banking on by any means, but I like the potential that's there. And I think the offensive line has the potential to be good this season, to be really good. As long as they're healthy, they have potentially the best left side in football with Elton Jenkins and David Bakhtiari. And Bakhtiari had to find his groove last year with his knee. But from week 10 on, his knee really wasn't an issue. He missed those few games because of appendicitis, but there was never, once it felt like they got over that hump and found the rhythm of what he needs to do each week from a practice standpoint to be prepared to play on Sundays, that the knee wasn't really much of an issue. So if he's can be healthy this season, they have potentially the best left side in football. And then I think the right side, they're bringing back experienced players, Josh Myers at center, John Runyon at right guard. And then there's a right tackle battle right now between Zach Tom and Yash Nyman. But I think there's a potential for that group that's an experienced unit collectively. And again, any success that Jordan Love is going to potentially have this season starts up front. The run game has to make plays, and he needs time. So I know it's the pass catchers are going to draw all the attention, but it starts with those guys up front.
Yeah, nothing really matters if the O-line's not good, right? I mean, battle
100%.
the trenches. That is the game of football. Before we let you go, Paul, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you again, where you have most of your work at, and anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Yeah, appreciate that. So you can find me on Twitter at Paul_Bretl. I find my work at Dairyland Express and Packers Wire.
All right, excellent. Well, looking forward to another great season. I think what we've uncovered today is that there's some sneaky value here on this Packers team. The exit of Aaron Rodgers, I think a lot of people might be down. I don't expect a ton of movement as far as average draft position for these players, but there's definitely some fantasy value to be tapped in here. Paul, thank you again. And everyone, I hope you appreciate our interview here about the Packers on the P2W YouTube channel. Take it easy.